Since the late 1980s, your work has been pivotal in making geographers and other social scientists, as well as humanities scholars and artists, reconsider their relation to spatiality. In the wake of Henri Lefebvre's studies on the relations of space, you belong to a group of critical social geographers that propose to rethink space as a mobile and creative entity in the articulation of neo-Marxism with Foucauldian post-structuralism. That was certainly a challenging move then, that did not avoid criticism. But from our current postmodern perspective, what are the new challenges that you face or that you see for your theory and for spatial thinking?
Well, as I said, there aren't that many in the category that I find myself in. And I guess one of the first challenges is to try to expand the number of people who are engaged with this kind of thinking. As I was saying before, there's tremendous resistance from geographers, left and right. It doesn't matter, the political part of the spectrum, in part because I'm much more eclectic than I used to be, and so therefore I upset people to the left and the right of me. So the first thing is to sort of to engage more thinkers to get themselves involved with what, to me, are some of the most exciting developments in spatial thinking ever in history. What I was talking about the stimulus of urban agglomeration and these Jane Jacobs externalities. I mean, this is astonishing things, and we can't leave it up to the economists. The economists are so narrow-minded that they won't be able to enrich these studies very much. That's where we need cultural studies people, cultural geographers and others, economic and social geographers and other thinkers, and to engage in that one. The whole spatial turn is being resisted by many, and carrying the spatial turn more deeply is another one of my current involvements. I don't care what the label is, and I don't care where it is, that still, even with this spatial turn, people are still using it very superficially. And so I think there's a new regionalism as well. All of these are part of deepening our understanding of the spatiality of life that I think we've sort of, so many people have stopped short of, nodding their heads to the spatial, but not taking it seriously enough. And so much of the stuff I'm writing is really just to get more people involved in really thinking more deeply about space. Without, as I was mentioning to you once, third space insulted some geographers because it sounded as if I'm saying this is the only way to do good geography. And that was maybe a factor in why some people turned off these ideas. But that's not my intent. But I do think geography, and space is more important than most people I know.
Well, and as you were saying earlier, I mean, this historical paradigm that in the past appropriated also geographical thinking, and that is still very resonant in some of the more conservative arenas.
But not only conservative, part of my struggle is against the continuing hold of social historicism. I've been doing some work on trying to understand how the force of this historicism emerged in the late 19th century, and how it implanted itself so deeply. In the German connection is the vital one. Rickert and all of the people who eventually gave birth to Heidegger, and these are people who were engaged in a very exciting idea. What, as the social sciences were being created, and they asked, well, what distinguishes the social sciences from the natural sciences? We can't just mimic physical science. There's got to be something special. And something special these German philosophers thought about was history. And so they said, we must construct a history that's as rigorous as science. Archival study, accurate footnotes, this whole notion of rigorous historiography. And once you have really good historians, they are the masters of all of the social sciences, which is what happened. And so today there's still relics of that historicism, even with the spatial turn. Most people are real. I'm very happy and pleased to see how open they are, but not open to the real deep penetration of the spatial into what they do, which requires, in my view, a real self-conscious critique of the fact that all of us have been taught to be historicists. You know, it's a very deep thing in our thought process to see temporality and process as time related, and time explains, time is social action, time is movement, change.
And space is immutable.
And space is immutable, fixed, dead, as Foucault said. And he was smiling. He said, "How could rational beings think that way?" And this was whatever, 60s, early 70s, and it's still there.
It's still there. It's true. Well, one of perhaps a sign of our times when you want to see how other people brand you, you look to Wikipedia. And there was one thing that puzzled me in the description. You are compared with Lefebvre and called a mystical Marxist.
Mystical, I haven't seen that.
And I thought that was a bit weird. How do you react to that? Mystical Marxist.
Well, I don't remember seeing that, but I can see Lefebvre being, you know, and myself as mavericks, as heterodox, somehow seeing that by not falling into the conventional orthodoxy, that we suddenly become mystical in the sense of metaphysical. I mean, Lefebvre called himself a meta-philosopher. And the narrow view in Western science of metaphysics is that it's outside positivist understanding and scientific understanding and has a little bit of mystical to it. And so in that sense, yeah, I'm a mystical Marxist. You know, I'm a mystical thinker too, in the sense that I'm very much a meta thinker. I'm thinking beyond conventions. And most people are comfortable with conventions. By the way, Wikipedia, for a period of time, confused me with Edward Said. And they had me as my birthplace was in Palestine.
Oh my goodness.
And I had Edward's birth date. So that was eventually corrected.
Well, without being essentialist, you were born in the Bronx in New York,
Yes.
Now live in the LA area. How do these two metropolises, how have they shaped your thought?
Well, the Bronx definitely shaped I was a geographer when I was 8. Even before I knew what the hell that was. I just loved knowing about the rest of the world, particularly cities. And that came out from the densities of the Bronx. The stimulus of density is very clear in my life. My interest in space, I've been wanting to write this up. It sort of relates in some ways to the games we played in the streets in New York. That certain times of the year and certain places we played marbles, with marbles, other flipping cards, other balls and handballs and stickball, and you know, learning into every space on my one street and the street corner that I lived on. You know, this was a very small space. I knew everything about this tiny space, and it was sort of thrilling. Part of the thrill of childhood was playing this game of four corners and so on. And so, yes, the Bronx was very influential on me, and I frequently, after spending so much time in Los Angeles, people ask me, do you like living in Los Angeles? And I refuse to answer. I don't know how to answer that. I've just been living in Los Angeles. Intellectually, it is one of the most fascinating cities on earth. Things keep happening in Los Angeles that keep my intellectual interest going. But there's so much in Los Angeles that I don't like.
Even in Orange County, I mean, that was fascinating when you said that Orange County is a buzzing, bustling center.
Well, yeah, but boring as hell in other ways too, and it's out of that, you know, the boredom of excessive buzz is a peculiar thing, a kind of my children. if I would predict having children grow up in Los Angeles, I would say it's a disaster. So much access to all kinds of things, drugs and everything else, and crime. Both of my kids have grown up to be really good. They may have experimented, but they just, they don't care. But yet, in a way, they were both jaded, male and female. They saw everything, and they chose not to do the bad things. And they're really good late 30s, early 40-year-old adults. I mean, they're really good human beings. And that happened in Los Angeles. And they did it, each of them had a whole friends network that were people like that. And so I don't know what it is that's something that there is also this positive force in Los Angeles that works, but it's inexplicable to the outside. I have developed a much stronger, for a variety of reasons, antagonism to New York. And New York styles and New York domination, as I was mentioning before, kind of New York bias in so many areas.
Intellectual arrogance?
An intellectual arrogance. What's even worse is, for example, there's a big debate going on between a so-called, LA school versus a New York school of urban analysis. And they're completely different. LA tries to understand the city so that we can understand what's happening in cities around the world. New York, everything in New York is unique. And all we want to know is to celebrate how different in New York is. And that's just the opposite of what the LA people are studying. Inward looking, doesn't care about other cities. New York is just this unique place that's fantastic and above all else. And everything is that, and that's the arrogance, and everything is done to reinforce it.
Now, one last question about your latest book, Seeking Spatial Justice. You discussed the basic distribution or the right to democratic existential spatiality, to use your terms. And it seems that it resonates a lot with other democratic struggles for the distribution of land, from the European point of view, the agrarian reform or the Sem Terra movement in Brazil, in Latin America, or even the critique of this soil nationalism in Israel that is going on with the state. So I was thinking whether you consider that your defense of this right to democratic spatiality follows in this long line of course, different, geographically different, politically different struggles, but whether it follows in this.
The answer is in part yes. And I like the way you put it, this right to democratic spatiality, which I never quite just used those words, but I sympathize entirely with that. The difference has to do with the level of consciousness. And it's also related to everything I was saying today, that, if you press people, they're going to say, it has to do with space and cities and land and whatever. But there's a big difference between consciously using spatial strategies for organizing, demonstrating, identity formation, social action, legal cases, consciously using the spatial is what I'm trying to encourage. I don't think, for example, I talk about what I call the Israeli occupied Palestine as a form of spatial injustice by the imposition of a colonizing of space in a variety of ways. With the generals, by the way, sitting and talking about Derrida, and it's an astonishing film.
And how do they react?
They say, well, we must know this because this is the only way we can understand the complexities of the urban. And so they're taking the urban theorists very seriously, and using the spatial, using Said and Derrida and Deleuze and my work, and using it for the terrible purposes, which is always possible. They realize the power of space. As generals, geography ça d'abord de faire la guerre, and so they understand the power of space, and So they read those people who write about space and power.
Do you think that your theory is out of control once you create it, that it can be appropriated?
Oh, well, that's the famous Derrida question, I guess. And I won't answer as Derrida's first answer, which is I'm not responsible for how people use my theory. Partially I am. But that's why I insist on this clear spatial consciousness and the idea that it can be misused and co-opted. And the idea is to try to find its roots of power to use it in a positive way. And partly it's why I don't abandon Marxism. At one level, I've moved away from the kind of absolutism that says you can only be 100% Marxist. I believe you can be 30% Marxist, 40% Marxist. So I retain Marxism in what I do, and it helps me with the political part of what I do. But to sort of sit and depend entirely on the Marxist interpretation is just unacceptable to me. It's not going to help us understand globalization, no matter how brilliant Marx was in the Communist Manifesto about capital globalizing. If you depend entirely on that, you really miss too much. Which is it's a comment about my great friend David Harvey, who now teaches globalization by having people read only the Communist Manifesto.
Which is clearly insufficient.
Which is brilliant, which is fantastic, but it's not enough.
Not enough. Thank you very much for your brilliant talk today and for this interview. Thank you.
A pleasure.